Okay, we're going to get started again. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick and I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be clean and sober. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. And once again, I'd like to thank Scott for the previous talk. That was incredible. He's going to carry us through 4 and 5. So once again, Scott S. from the Underground Group. Thank you.
My name's Scott. I'm an alcoholic. So we've just taken our third step prayer based on that decision. We've affirmed our decision with the prayer, essentially. And what does it mean? How do we show that we've turned our lives and will over to the care of God as we currently understand Him? Well, we're going to get right into step 4. It describes this fourth step, or our third step decision as being vital and crucial. It's life-giving, right? Vital, it's life-giving, it's crucial, it's absolutely necessary. And it doesn't mean anything. It has little effect unless we immediately back it up with a fourth step. So we can do a third step prayer and then go back into our lives and get caught up in all that stuff. Right? And any effect we may have had from that prayer will just slowly dissipate down right back into restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness unless we start to back that decision up, to back that prayer up with some inventory. So therefore, if you open up to 64, it has instructions on exactly how to do this stuff in our book. Thank God. I've heard of all sorts of I don't even know what to call them, ways of doing inventory. I've heard of people, writing all their assets down, like all their good stuff. Hey, if you got any assets or good stuff going in your life, man, that's great. But I don't really care about that stuff. We're looking to get rid of stuff. The process of spiritual awakening is a process of removal. We've gotten clear on that in step 3. The less self, the more God, the freer I get. All right? We're going to get rid of the things that are blocking me from God, the things that are blocking me from experiencing freedom, oneness with God, union with God, communion with God. That's what I'm going for here, and I need less self and more God in order for that to happen. Right? The book talks about how we can recover if we have the capacity to be honest. This bottle is about 1/6 of the way full. It has a lot of capacity, right? Because it's mostly empty. If I want to have the capacity to be honest, I need to be emptied out. If I'm full of self, I lack the capacity to be honest. Do you see where I'm going? I'm going to have a lot more capacity in a moment because I'm going to empty it out. My problem is I turn around and it's full again. It's like a magic bottle. I'm full again. I empty out, I turn around, I'm full again. I empty out, I turn around, I'm full again. That's my condition. That is alcoholism. And I'm okay with that because we have a process for that. And it starts off here with my inventory. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. And I'll say this, a business that's always taking inventory is never open for business. But a business which takes no regular inventory, right? Some folks believe step 4 is a one and done thing, and then you just live in 10, 11, and 12 until they pull the grass over our face. And That's fine. God bless you. Me, I go through the step formally. I go from 1 through 12, really 1 through 11. I do that once a year with my sponsor. And I practice the 10th and 11th steps every day and take a look at things. And the reason for doing that is earlier, like I said, I like the effect produced by God. I like the effect produced by going through this work. And just like in my home or in our homes, we know that you do that, you keep your house clean, right? You don't just let garbage build up. But every once in a while, you got to pull that fridge out and get the dust bunnies from out behind the fridge. You pull the couch out and you get those dust bunnies out from behind the couch. So I don't think anyone's ever gotten loaded because they went through the steps formally, yearly or annually or biannually. Most of the people that I've really had a problem with, me going through the steps once a year, were people who aren't interested in going through the steps at all. It just seems to be that way. Anyway, it tells us what this inventory is really all about. It's the same as if owning a business. If you had a supermarket, you wouldn't just leave eggs on the shelf until they sprouted chickens. You know what I mean? We wouldn't just leave bottles of milk on the shelf until it turned into curds of cheese. You just wouldn't do that. Nobody would shop in your store anymore. That stuff would lose its value. It has to be gotten rid of. So it compares it to that. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. I talked about seeking God. What's the easiest conception of God that I ever had a relationship with was truth, right? I don't have to think about what God looks like, what God's will is for me, if it's a man, a woman, angry, happy God. I didn't have to think of any of that. I just thought of God as absolute truth and have a relationship with the truth. And in that, want to know God's will? Seek truth. Where do I belong in the world? Seek truth. Where am I going in the world? Seek truth. And be dedicated to that truth. And I run into a lot less problems that way. So fact-finding, truth-finding, fact-facing, truth-facing process. That's what we're getting into here. This work is bringing us right up against the truth. The truth about ourselves and how we relate to the rest of the world. Earlier on in step 3, it talked about being an extreme example of self-will run riot, though we usually don't think so. Right? So we're going to go from that mental illness to facing the truth. All right? Earlier on than that in the book, it says there is a solution almost none of us liked. And then it describes what we're about to get into. The leveling of our pride and all that. So we're not looking to have fun here. Okay? We're looking to get down to business. And alcoholism is ugly. Beauty is skin deep, but ugly is all the way to the bone. You know, we come in here and the guys, we want to look handsome and charming, and the girls, you want to be cute, right? Because we want people to like us. And I'll tell you what, you know, some of you look pretty cute, and some of us are pretty handsome and charming, and then we get involved with each other, and you find out I'm not so charming, and I realize you're not that cute, are you? You know what I mean? Because we got all this stuff going on, and we're all trying to get our way in here in our relationships, at our jobs, in AA, right? And we're all whistling in the dark when that's going on. So it's truth-finding, truth-facing process, an effort, again, to discover the truth about the stock and trade. Not your truth, not my truth. They're nonsense words. My truth is a lie. I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, so I'm not looking to seek my truth. That might sound like some spiritually wisdom stuff to say in a meeting or up here, but there's no such thing as my truth. There's no such thing as your truth or spiritual truth. That's the kind of stuff we say when we want to sound like we know what we're talking about. There's only the truth. And if garden variety, run-of-the-mill truth isn't good enough for me, my chances of finding truth are about 0. I have to make up words like my truth and your truth and such and so on. Anyway, I got that out of the way. But we're looking to discover the truth about the stock and trade. We are the stock and trade. What's going on inside us is the stock and trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. The things in my life which are making my life difficult and in some instances impossible, I need to get rid of that way of doing business promptly and without regret. Now, I've been down so long it looks like up. I live by this stuff, right? Character defect is how I do business. And now you're telling me I have to get rid of this stuff promptly and without regret, right? So there's going to be some resistance here. Don't let it keep you out of the game. Earlier on, it says no one among us has been able to live by perfect adherence to these principles, okay? But we have to get started somewhere. If the owner is the business is to be successful, it cannot fool himself about values. We can't fool ourselves about what has value in our way of thinking and operating. You know, I remember my father teaching me when I was a kid, you know, if you're getting into an argument with somebody and you know it's going somewhere, man, the first thing you want to do is break that guy's nose. That had value to me. Okay? Now today I can't fool myself. That has no value. If I'm having a disagreement with somebody, you know, we could talk about it. I don't find it just so happens I don't find myself in the position where I feel I need to break somebody's nose anymore either. So there's something to be said about that. But if you get what I'm saying, some of the rules and ways of thinking and living that we've lived by all of our lives may be the very thing that's keeping us blocked from our Creator, that's keeping us blocked from our fellows, that's causing us problems at work, in our relationships, in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I have belief systems, I call them castles, because I've built castles out of these belief systems. I call them castles because I'll defend them. I'll defend them like a castle. I'll go to war with you if you challenge my belief systems, okay? And some of them have no value, right? We had to quit fooling ourselves about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. Now, I'll tell you straight off the bat, my first inventory that I did with my sponsor, as desperate as I was, I did not do it honestly. I held on to things that I wanted to manage because, trust me, the most important things in my life, the things that are most important to me, I want to manage them. That is the alcoholic condition. The things that are most important to us are the ones that are hardest to let go. It's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. As an alcoholic, if something is important to me, and I'm really clear on the fact that I'm alcoholic and I can no longer manage my own life, the thing I should want to do the most is turn this over to God to run this, not me. But I have a mental illness as well. I believe I can manage my own life, even though I know I can't. All this is going on inside of us, and if you don't believe me, take a look at your own experience. Our families are important to us, right? Don't we want to manage the family politics and dynamics? Right? Our jobs are important to us, right? Don't we want to manage our position at job and jockey around and make sure we don't avoid this person and don't get on that person's nerve and please the boss and do all this stuff instead of just showing up to be of service? Anyway. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. All right, so we're looking for our own flaws, our own faults. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what it defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Now, they're talking about self. Earlier on, we were saying, talking selfishness and self-centeredness, that we believe is the root of our troubles, not drinking. Now, they talk about self in a way here that makes it seem like it's something else. It's other than us, right? It's not my true nature. It's not my true being. It's this self thing that is manifesting itself in various ways, and it's defeating me in my life. It's defeating me in my relationships. It's It's defeating me in my usefulness. It's defeating me in my happiness. So we look at its common manifestations. Well, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. You mean even alcohol? From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, spiritual sickness. For we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally, no longer thinking of a drink, and physically, no longer taking a drink, no longer experiencing the phenomenon of craving, which takes me to the next drink and the next drink and the next drink and the next drink. So the main problem for the alcoholic centers in the mind, but the solution is in the spirit. Well, the soul drives the human. The psychic change that Dr. Silkworth talked about, in the doctor's opinion, and what Scott was talking about early this morning, the word psyche, the earliest definition of psyche was soul. So the word psychic comes from soul, right? It's the soul that drives the human. So my illness is a spiritual malady. It affects the way I think. The way I think affects the way I act. The way I act affects the way I drink. I will go back to a drink. I'm going to go back to a drink. I can't stop it. I don't get a vote on when I drink. It's going to happen. There's nothing I can do about it unless I experience a psychic change, a soul change, a spiritual solution. So, resentment is the number one offender, destroys more of us than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. We want to straighten out spiritually so that we can straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So now we'll get into the mechanics of it. What I do is a 4-column inventory. I take my resentments and I put them down on paper. We listed the people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. Now, what's anger? Now I start getting into convincing myself I'm not really angry. I don't really have any resentments. I mean, it was a joke. I hated the world and everybody in it when I met my sponsor. But now I don't want to show this guy because, he'd been out there on the circuit speaking and doing this stuff for 40 some years. So I don't want this guy to think I'm really screwed up. My wife could tell you how screwed up I was, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous, man. Like I have something to protect here. Talk about lack of value. So I put 10 names down. 10 people, principles, or institutions. Names of people. That's easy. Well, principles. Well, what's a principle that I may not be on board with? All right, love thy neighbor. There's a principle. Maybe I don't want to love my neighbor. Maybe my neighbor's an ass and I want to beat on him every day. And he deserves it. And I have that thing going on where I usually don't think so. I'm being selfish, right? Institution. Well, criminal justice institution. The church. Any form of government, whatever. Institutions. I take all that stuff and I put it down on paper. But I lied to myself and him, and there was a lot of stuff I caught up with it later. How angry I was in my marriage and how I blamed my wife for everything in my marriage at the time. I didn't put that down on paper. Most of it anyway. Just kind of glance over it. Why? Because I wanted to manage it. I wasn't so convinced. As desperate as I was, I still had to get beat down some more. That's my experience. It doesn't have to be your experience. It doesn't have to be your experience, but if it is, I'll say this: keep working. Keep working these steps. I'm only willing to be as honest as I'm willing to be at that moment. I've experienced that in my life, going through this work. All right? It talks about growing in understanding and effectiveness as we do this work. All right? And I believe that's all part of it. the ability to be honest. So, I take that person, that principle, or that institution, and I set it down in my first column. And that's just it. Joe, say. There's Joe over in column 1. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, we found out it was our blah, 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 blah. Okay, we'll get to that now. So we asked ourselves why we were angry. So the cause, that's column 2, the cause of the resentment. And I was instructed to keep it very short and sweet, because what I would like to do is justify the resentment in column 2. You know, I'm angry at Joe, and here's 100 reasons why. And if you were me, you'd be angry too. And we're doing all that. And I'll listen to inventory today, and a lot of the guys that, that I'm sponsoring, their second column, and I'll hear them start to get into that. They're trying to convince themselves and me that, this, you'd be angry too at this guy, and I have to stop them and say, what happened to short and sweet? Joe, he did this, period. Because the mind is going to start to get in here. I'll mention this. Before I write any resentment or fear inventory, I say a prayer. And most of the time I'll write it across the top of the page. God, help me to be honest and help me to see the truth. Amen. I thank him. Because if I want the book says the answers will come if we want them. Right? So if I want the truth and I want to be honest and I want to be fearless and thorough, I'll get the power to do that. And it's going to come from out here. Because the mind is not interested in seeking its own fault. Believe me. So I ask myself why I'm angry. I keep it short and sweet. That's column 2. Third column, it says, in most cases we found it was our self-esteem, pocketbooks, ambitions, personal relationships, including sex, that were hurt and threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up, and bent out of shape. All these areas, I put down the 7 areas of self. Ambition, personal relationships, emotional security, self-esteem, pocket, sex relations, and what else we got? Did I have emotional security? Did I say that one? Yeah. Oh, pride. Now, I didn't know what a lot of these things really meant, these areas of self. So, okay, let's say, that's my third column. And it doesn't say, I don't put down just whether it was affected or not. I try to put how. I write how these things were affected, not just a checklist type of an inventory. Oh, was it? Yes. Check, check, check. No, I don't do that. I'll elaborate on it a little bit. And ultimately what I find in my resentment inventory is the only truth I'm going to get to is in the 4th column. The first 3 columns turn out to be a lie, really. I mean, except for the person. The person's not a lie, But what I think happened in the 2nd column turns out to be not so true. And all these areas of self, it's all stuff I created myself. But what do they mean? What's ambition mean? Well, what I want. All right. Personal relationships. Well, how I'd like this relationship to go. How is this resentment threatening how I want this relationship to go? Self-esteem. What's that mean? Well, it's how I see myself. And there's 2 sides to self-esteem. One is I'm lower than whale dung. And the other is, don't you know how great I am? How dare you? So what's being affected there? Emotional security. What's that mean? Security, it says here in the one example. What I need to be okay. I need you to like me to be okay. I need us to be friends in order to be okay. I need you to worship me to be okay, maybe. I don't know what it's going to look like. But this is what I need to be okay. How is that hurt or threatened? It's got me so burned up. Pocketbook's easy. That's my money, my finances. How has this affected my finances? My pride. How I think others see me. You know, when I give men instructions to do their inventory, I'll give them the definitions to all these words so that we know what we're talking about here. You know, when you say, oh, my ambitions were affected, you know that it's, okay, what I want is affected. My pride. Oh, my pride was hurt. Well, what's your pride meaning? Well, you know what I mean? I didn't really know what all this stuff meant. How I think others see me. That's my pride. How's that hurt, interfered with, or threatened? And sex relations. You know, how's this interfere? And I've heard people describe it as, oh, what my ideas are as a man. How's that? Nah, it's talking about sex. It may or may not apply, depending on the resentment. I don't know. But anyway, if my sexual relationship is threatened, I'm going to be pretty bent out of shape. So I take a look at all that stuff and I elaborate on it. It's not just a checklist for me. If it's a checklist for you, God bless you. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. What I would suggest, or what I would put out there for consideration, is maybe we take a look a little deeper. You know what I mean? A little deeper, and we may touch on something that needs healing. I would say we will, but I'll use words like Bill. He was smart. He maybe and perhaps, because there's always somebody out there that's going, nah. But anyway, I've been able to experience a great deal of healing here in Alcoholics, and I need to heal. I've been operating out of my brokenness and out of my wounds all my life. All right? Like I said, character defect is how I do business. When you meet me, you don't meet me. You meet whatever character I think I need to be in order for this to go my way. If it's a tough guy, that's what you get. If it's a nice guy, that's what you get. If it's a passive guy just sitting there watching, that's what you get. All right? So we're trying to put an end to that. We're trying to seek truth. All right, so we can see that these things were, threatening. We were threatened. We were sore. We were burned up. On our grudge list, as we set us opposite each name, our injuries. Was it our self-esteem? That's what it goes on about. That's our third column. And it gives some three-column, what do you call it? Three-column written examples here of the inventory. Below that, now it's not into the fourth column yet. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty, which I lacked at my first go through the steps. And I'll tell you what, I paid for it. It was shortly thereafter, going through this work, my marriage really fell apart fast because of the things I was unwilling to let go of. I wanted to manage that. I really thought I knew what was wrong with my marriage, and I wasn't willing to discuss it. And as a result, it was over. But I said earlier on, like my first wife and I, we're better friends now than when we were married. God is kind. We've been able to heal, and I'm very grateful for that. Nothing happens by accident. If her and I were meant to be married, we'd still be married. I believe that wholeheartedly. But when we were finished, we considered it carefully, these three columns. Am I really being honest? Because I'll tell you what, it's going to catch up with us anyway. I mean, life itself is going to bring to the surface every single part of my being that does not know God and needs to know God. Trust me. And if we're dedicated to this process, we'll get clear on stuff. So the first thing, it was apparent that this world and its people were often quite wrong. That's as far as I could see at that point, is that you guys have really been sticking it to me. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got, right? I had never tried to look at my life from any other angle other than I'm bent out of shape and it's your fault. I wasn't willing to consider that maybe my marriage was miserable because of me and the way I saw things and what I was expecting. I showed up to everything to be fed. I didn't show up to life to serve. I didn't show up to AA to serve. I showed up to be fed. That's why you'll hear, oh man, was that a good meeting or a bad meeting? There's no such thing. It was a meeting. If I show up here to serve, I'll never feel the need to be fed. I will get fed. I'll never leave here hungry if I show up to serve. If I show up to be fed, I'll go home hungry every night. That's my experience. If I show up to life to be fed, I'm starving. But if I show up to serve, I get fed. I don't even realize it. But that's not how I walked into this deal. I didn't come in here looking to see where I'm at fault. I didn't come in here looking to see what needed to be emptied out. I came in here, I want to acquire things. I didn't want to have a spiritual experience. I want to have a material experience. And is it human nature? Maybe. It's definitely alcoholic nature. I just thought everybody felt that way until I would be talking to a layperson, and the more I talk to them, they start scooting along the bench, like, looking at me like I'm nuts. And I'm like, am I nuts? Don't ask people that. I remember my sponsor talking about going to a therapist, in the beginning. And he asked the therapist, so how am I doing? Don't ask that. He asks people that, Oh my God. So, let me see. The more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Even getting what we want doesn't solve it. You know what I mean? You ever want something so bad, then you get it, and you're like, man, this sucks. I want that car so bad. Then I get it, and I'm like, man, I got crazy car payments and stuff. And man, I wish I'd have kept my old truck. And now there's cigarettes, trash and stuff getting thrown in the back seat. And, you know what I mean? You don't really care about it. Stop getting it washed. A couple dents, who cares? You know what I mean? Or that girl or that man, that woman or man you think is, man, she is she's the bee's knees, right? And you get over there and you get snuggled up next to her, man. You go out 3-4 months later, you're like, nah. The newness wears off. I'll tell you, love is very ordinary. I always thought love was that excitement. That thing that goes on when you first meet somebody. That's not love. Love is very ordinary. But anyway, triumphs were short-lived. It's plain to see. It is plain that life, which includes deep resentment, leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these. Oh, we can permit it or not permit it? Yeah. With this process that we're getting into here, that's brought us to here, and this process we're getting into here, now we can permit it or not permit it. I have no say in when it crops up, but when it does, do I have a response to it? Am I permitting this stuff to dominate me? Am I permitting the world and the people in it to dominate me? So that to the extent we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? But with alcoholics, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, the business of resentment is infinitely grave. I said earlier that it destroys more alcoholics than anything. It'll kill us. It is infinitely grave. Forever grave. We found that it is fatal, for when we harbor such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, suddenly shows up, and we drink again. Right? After all the sprees wear off, and we're just in here just not drinking, and we go on a sex spree and we blast our way through AA, and then maybe out there, and I go on a whatever, man. Maybe I go to the gym and I'm hitting the gym and I'm shooting steroids and I'm doing that whole thing, and I get back into the neighborhood politics and do all that stuff, and that loses its luster, and then all of a sudden suddenly shows up, and I end up with a drink in my hand, right? The insanity of alcohol returns. And with us, to drink is to die, right? If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. right? Sitting here figuring out how screwed up everything is. It's not for me. It's not for me. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men. Dubious means of questionable value. But for the alcoholics, these things are poison, right? So justifying my resentments and figuring out how badly you screwed me over and how messed up you are, that is a questionable luxury, right? Of questionable value. An exercise that is very questionable. We turn back to the list, okay? We're going back to that list. The name, the principle, the institution, the cause, the areas of self that I see it affects, right? It's only how I see it to this point. The entire resentment is really my own perception of what's going on here at this point. We turn back to that, for it held the key to the future. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle, right? I'm looking at it this way, now I'm going to go over here to the other side. An entirely new angle I'm going to look at my resentment from. And if we have sponsors that we call up with a resentment and they agree with us on how we see things at the onset of that phone call, get a new sponsor. Especially for relationships. And I'm not saying it for my own selfish means, because I want you to forgive me no matter what. But when I see a habit, it happens all too often. Man or woman calls the sponsor about their significant other, love interest. Before the end of the phone call, the sponsor's agreeing. You know what I mean? And before you know it, you're talking crap about the other person. Yeah, you know what? You need to break up with her and him. You know what I mean? And hey, look, maybe you do. I don't know. But if we have sponsors that just jump on the bandwagon and start agreeing with our resentments right off the rip on a phone call, we need new sponsors. Anyway, we began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. As soon as I woke up in the morning, I mean, what I experienced was, the vulture on the bedpost. That's what greeted me every morning. I don't know about you. It's like, good morning, Scott. What kind of fun we can have today. And then I'd leave the house and I hated the world and everybody in it. I mean, I was just angry from the moment I woke up. The world and the people in it really dominated me. I drove down the road and I noticed every single traffic infraction that was made in front of me that I would witness. That guy didn't use his turn signal. This one was going too fast. This one didn't, change lanes without the proper amount of distance. And it got a lot worse. Thank you, Ron. I mean, I would chase people down the highway. It was insane. But God is kind. It's a miracle that someone didn't put me out of my misery. But that's how I was living my life. The world and the people in it really dominated me. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. Because it's going to dominate me. Fancied or real. I remember earlier on page 62, it talked about self-delusion. I believe the false. Of me or created by me about you. So, and I usually don't think so when that's happening. So when I believe this stuff is really the way I think it is, right? It's fancied. And maybe you did do me wrong. And it's legitimate that you did me wrong. So, can I afford resentment? I can't. It's going to kill me. It's going to cut me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. And I'll justify it, therefore playing God, as if I've never made mistakes and hurt somebody. So fancied or real, They have the power to kill me. I can't afford them. How can I escape? How am I going to get free of this stuff? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? Mastered means getting rid of. How am I going to do it? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. I can't act my way into right thinking any more than I could pretend I wasn't an alcoholic or just not drink or think the tape through. Right? All that nonsense that you'll hear, oh, act your way into right thinking, do the next right thing. They're not words to live by in Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe to a lay person out there who doesn't suffer from alcoholism can live by those words. But if we're counting on it, that we're going to live by those words, we're going to die. Because I lack the power to pull that stuff off. Could not wish them away any more than alcohol. When these things crop up, what are we going to do with them? This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. I'm talking about the people who legitimately wronged us, not the fancied ones. We're going to get to the truth about that in our fourth column. Is this fancied, or is this someone who eventually wronged us? And maybe they're sick. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they didn't even realize we were there. Because I don't want to use this is an excuse to say everyone else is spiritually sick. I've seen that happen often, far too often. Well, the only reason that I'm resentful at you is because you're spiritually sick. They're never even looking to see where I'm at fault. We just go right to, well, they're spiritually sick. The book says it. And the book says perhaps. Perhaps. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? I almost wish Bill didn't write that. Because what I see, I'm not saying it's wrong, but just hear me out. What I've seen is there's a tendency here that, oh, well, we just have pity on everybody. Oh, with those sick people over there because I'm so well that I can see how sick they are because they offended me. You know what I mean? It's a trap. Watch that you don't fall into it. When I'm resentful, whether they're sick or not, fancied, real, sick or not, what I'm looking for is the truth about me in that fourth column, right? God save me from from being angry. Wonderful prayer. Thy will be done. We avoid retaliation or argument. That includes Facebook too. Okay? We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all, but at least God will show us how to take a kind and tolerant view of each and every one. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. So whatever we think they did to us, we're going to put that out of our mind. We resolutely, now later on it says we resolutely turn our thoughts. This is later in step 10. Now that word resolutely, this is how we're going to get through this. All right? We resolutely looked for our own mistakes. I want to tell you what it doesn't ask us to do is to see our part. Nowhere. Nowhere does it say, oh, I had to find, my part in all this. Nowhere does it say that. I'll get to how I see all that too. Where the mistaking the word mistake or fault or mistakes and using the word part can get us into a lot of trouble. And it never says the word we had to find our part. Nowhere. Referring to we had to look for our own mistakes. Okay, now here's my fourth column. And it's not a checklist because it says, where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Where had, not if we had. Because then it's just check, 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 check. Where had I been selfish? Where was I selfishness breeds dishonesty. And it looks like, oh, well, it's really all self-centered fear that's got me. Fear, that's the caboose. Selfishness is the engine that's driving the whole thing. Where am I selfish? Where's the dishonesty in connection with that fear? Maybe I'm being dishonest with myself about the whole thing. Self-seeking. What actions am I taking to get this to go my way? Am I openly angry with you? Am I trying to be nice to you to get this to go my way or change? Or am I giving you the silent scorn treatment? What's wrong, Scott? Nothing. Nothing. And they use the word frightened. Where was I frightened? And I love when guys that I'll do inventory with, they'll say, oh, yo, man, I'm feared up. Oh, you're feared up, are you? You mean you're frightened? How's that sound? I mean, I was a psycho when I was out there, you know? Armed robbery, all kind of crazy stuff I did. I mean, all the time. Here I'm frightened. I thought I wasn't afraid of anything. Here, all those things I did when growing up, it was because I was afraid. I was afraid of what you might think if I didn't do that stuff. But if you use the term feared up, and you're a man, because I don't think women use that stuff, knock it off. Because it's a tough guy's way of saying frightened. And tough guys don't heal. Tough guys don't recover. Straight up. So you're frightened. Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Cedar hammering that home again. Because I can't afford to legitimize this resentment under any circumstances. Where were we to blame? The inventories was ours, not the other man. When we saw our faults, we listed them. So that's what we're looking for, our faults, not our parts. Because I didn't have a part in a lot of things. When I was about 6 years old, I had experienced some terrible abuses that changed my life forever. And when it came time to finally get honest about that stuff, and it was only a handful of years ago that I had done it, I'm finally ready to get honest about this stuff and the resentment that I had seething in me when it became clear to me really what had happened to me as a 6-year-old. Where was my part? What part did I have in that? I was 6. And I wasn't asked to look for my part. I was asked to look for my fault. And the fault was that now I'm a 44-year-old man and I'm still carrying this stuff around and it's killing me. That was my fault. My inability to forgive so that I can heal. That was my fault. And the being frightened about what this meant to me, about me as a man. You know what I mean? What's this mean? So, don't use the word part if you can help it. And if you can't help it, take note of it and make the shift into what this book is offering us. Blame, fault, mistakes, but it never asks us what our part was. Because some things are going to happen to us in life where we had no part. And if I can't get to the truth about where my fault is, I'd never get to heal from that. All right? Just something to put out there for consideration. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and we're willing to set these matters right. Okay, so now I'm starting to develop a harms list. If I find out that, I'm really angry at you, but it's really me that owes you the apology. Maybe it's me that stepped on your toes. I'm angry with you for talking trash about me throughout the neighborhood, but here I owe you $500. Or whatever it might be. So we might start pulling some harms out of this. A little harms list going. Notice that the word fear is bracketed along the difficulties with Mr. Brown. the employer and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. Fear. Remember earlier on, page 62, I talked about the word fear. It talks about 100 forms of fear. Can I name 10 right now? And I'm driven by 100 forms of fear? It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with this. One thread of fear in this shirt, and his shirt's ruined. The fabric of our existence, our very lives, is shot through with threads of fear. And it takes away from the value that we bring to life and experience in life. It set in motion trains of circumstances that brought misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. Because I'm afraid. It's going to cause me to say or do things I shouldn't be saying or doing. Or I'm going to sit back and be quiet when I should be saying something because I'm afraid. And that sets into motion these circumstances that land me in a position to be hurt. And I'm sore, I'm bent out of shape. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. It steals from me, fear. It robs me of making choices in my life. If I'm driven by fear, I'm not making a choice. I'm doing whatever fear tells me to do. Oh, did you choose to do this or do that? Oh, well, sure I did. I'm not drunk. I have choices today. Well, really? Well, if fear was involved in that decision, I'd say it wasn't a choice at all. I made a decision based on fear. That's not a choice. And how often does that go on in our everyday lives? We don't even realize it. We think we're out here making choices and we're not. Fear has robbed us of that. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. Now, I've heard a lot of different ways of doing fear inventory. I've heard it done 4 columns, like resentment, but that's not what it's asking. It's just asking us these 4 questions. Really, it's these 4 considerations here. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. Okay, so I write a list of fears. Even though we had no resentment in connection with them, we asked ourselves why we had them. Okay, first sentence, I do 4-sentence inventory for fear. First sentence is really the fear. Second, why? Why am I afraid? I write out why I'm afraid. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? 4th sentence, where's the self-reliance in this fear? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't quite go far enough. Some of us had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem. Or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. We've all seen that guy or gal who comes in like, you know what I mean? Like they got it going on and all, but I would submit that most of the time we're just whistling in the dark with that stuff. You know? The more I try to make it look like to you I got it going on, I'm probably scared to death. That's just been my experience. Okay? Perhaps there is a better way. Now here comes my 4th sentence, which really doesn't deliver the answers that most of us are looking for when we're showing up to these inventories. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so, for we are now living on a different basis, right? We're not living on this self-reliance basis. We're living on a God-reliance basis. The trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. Am I interested in playing the role God assigns, or do I have ideas about where I want to be in my life? We are in the world to play the role He assigns. Am I dedicated to that? Just a thought. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So, listen, God speaks in chaos. God speaks to me in brick walls. calamity. Can I match that with serenity? Because there's a lot of lessons to be learned in the chaos. Life is chaotic. There's a lot of ups, downs, disappointments, all that stuff. I haven't run into one unicorn or one rainbow popping out of a cloud or any of that stuff. It's been far greater than that for me. The reality of God and the reality of living life on God's terms, not life on life's terms. I'm not interested in that. My fourth sentence is really, it's a question. What's the reason for my fear? And the answer is the same every time. Not trusting and relying upon God to care for and protect me. And what I was really looking for in the beginning of this inventory process was an answer to my fear. Well, do this and you won't be afraid. That's what I wanted in the fourth sentence, right? Because I want that kind of stuff. 2 + 2 is 4, right? I want God on a spreadsheet. Well, Scott, if you do this, you won't be afraid. If you do, I'll tell you when I'm a lot less afraid is when I'm less relying on self and the stories I write. Usually the third question, where's the self-reliance and the fear? It's the story that I'm writing about this situation that has me in fear. As if I'm a Svengali and I can tell the future. How often do we write stories about the future and at the end we get pounded every time? It's like, when am I going to start to anticipate good things happening? Instead of writing these stories of gloom and doom about what I don't even, like I'm a fortune teller or something. And the reason I do that is because I'm playing God. I'm not relying on God to care for and protect me. I'm relying on me and my thinking mind. And that's just a producer of fear. Right? So I get stuck in that. Unless I realize that I'm in the world here to play the role He assigns. And that I decided my life was no longer any of my business back in step 3. I'm here to be a servant to God. Why am I so afraid? Would God give His servants a bag of straw instead of clothing? Right? Would God feed His children a stone if His child were hungry? No. God's going to take care of me as long as I show up to serve Him and play the role He assigns. Why am I so afraid all the time? We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us, right? Right back to the principle and the agent. In my third step decision, God is the principle, I am the agent. The agent represents the principle. That's how that relationship works. So I'm going to demonstrate, or let Him demonstrate through me what He can do. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once we commence to outgrow fear. That's how I commence to outgrow fear. God, please take me from this position of fear. Show me where You would have me be. I'm in the world to play the role You assign. Maybe where I think I want to go is not so important right now as to where You want me to go. All right? I need to break that rigidity that I had when I showed up to my sponsor about everything I thought I knew about life and where I needed to be and where I needed to go and how you should be acting and how this should turn out and how it is going to turn out or not turn out. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. And listen, sex is a lot of fun. And, God made us so that we would like each other. Sex is very powerful. There's that thing that goes on. You know what it is, that chemistry it's called, right? And God made us that way so that we would succeed as a species. So, there's nothing wrong with sex. But do I continually land in trouble with it? All right? I'm not here to tell anybody what they're supposed to like. If you're heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, I don't care. I don't. That's not for me to determine. You know whether you are or not, and that's your business. Great. But do I want to go on in my life regretting my sexual experiences and hurting people? So, many of us needed an overhauling there, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running extremes, absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. I mean, I've thought that in my marriage, you know what I mean? I didn't think about how I could, bring love to the table. That, well, it was always under the sheets. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to love somebody. It's almost like sex was the only way I thought there was to show somebody love. I was a little immature when I met my first wife. Anyway, where are we at? They see its significance everywhere. One would allow man no flavor for his fare. The other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We're not to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. The book will be the arbiter of our sex conduct. God will be the arbiter of our sex conduct, and I'll get to that, and then we'll take another break. We reviewed our own conduct. And before that it says we all had sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? We reviewed our conduct over the years past. Now here's the sex inventory. We answer these questions. Not just had we been selfish. Again, it's where. Where had we been selfish? Dishonest or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? Right, there's the questions, and I answer them. We got this held down on paper and looked at it. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. It doesn't ask us to write a sex ideal anywhere. I'm not saying don't do that. But the book does not ask us to write down a sex ideal. And I thought it did, so I wrote one, and ridiculously enough, my first sex ideal that I wrote down was what kind of woman I wanted. Not what kind of guy do I want to be when she shows up. And I'm not saying physical attributes. It was still ridiculous. And then besides that, nowhere does it ask us to write down a sex ideal. We tried to shape a sane one for our future sex life, right? We're going to have ideas about how we want to operate. We subjected each relationship to this test, each relationship. So I go back as far as I can remember. I actually even put down people that I might have wanted to get cute with, because I could have caused harm just trying to get cute with you. I might have said or done something I shouldn't have to you, just to kind of test the waters and see if you liked me. You get what I'm saying? So it's not just people I had sex with. Maybe somebody I wanted to. We subjected each relation to this test. Here's the arbiter of our sex conduct. Was it selfish or not? I'm not the arbiter. Here it is. Was it selfish or not? We ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good. I drop that line sometimes when it suits me. Here we go, though. Again, not to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. All right? It's not an ass-beating contest on ourselves here. Now, it says whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we had done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. If I've been having an affair with a married woman, I'm not going to go knocking on her door and saying, hey, listen, I need to make amends to you. And then her husband comes up and says, hey, who's that? Or her kids come out and say, Mommy, who's this guy here? Okay? So we need to have a bit of discernment And it's good sponsorship can help us with that. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Like anything else, the right answers will come if we want them. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with another person is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short. Listen up. Suppose we fall short of our chosen ideal and stumble. Does that mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. But this is only a half-truth. Falling short and disregarding are two different things. That's what only makes it a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives, right? Have I disregarded my ideal, or have I fallen short of it? That's the measure. If we are sorry for what we have done, an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and our lesson learned. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our own experience. To sum it up, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into working with others, into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge, when to yield would mean heartache. If we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. And again, that's a promise in itself, because I wasn't real thorough about my first inventory. I've gone through the work with my sponsor Mickey about 11 or 12 times. And here's another thing when it comes to somebody's sponsor. Like my sponsor lives in Denver, Colorado. He's 2,000 miles away. That had no impact on my spiritual awakening. Didn't make it less of a punch, or, you know what I mean? God connected the dots for me. So if we're having a hard time finding somebody in our area that we, to sit down face to face with to take care of all this, not just for the instructional portion, but for the following step when we get into step 5, then maybe we can go outside of our area. Maybe we don't know what we think. We think that this thing only works face to face, and that's not true. I went to Staten Island, New York to find my sponsor for him to take me through this work, because I had listened to a guy talking, who's a very dear friend of mine today, my friend Peter. I heard him talking about this stuff, and I had an awakening of sorts that had me driving up there to go to this workshop. And I was going to he was going to be my sponsor if I had to throw him in the trunk of my car and take him home with me. I was doing anything now at this point. I was so desperate. And what ended up happening, these two guys from out west, this man Mickey from Colorado and his sponsor Gary B from Indiana, they were doing the workshop. And they had come from this Fellowship of the Spirit conference that they had put together out in Colorado that I go to every year. I recommend it highly. It's in July. It's beautiful in the Rocky Mountains. It's all big book, 12-step stuff. Just people like us, everyday alcoholics that are into this book. It is the Fellowship of the Spirit. And they're sharing their experience, and at the end of that conference, I went there to ask Pete to sponsor me, and I ended up asking Mickey. He's the kindest, most gentle man I've ever met in my life. He was a gentleman, and I was not. And I wanted what he had. And today we're all very tight. We're like a family. And this stuff has just transformed me. But in my experience, I've only done inventory with Mick a handful of times. I get to see him once or twice a year. A handful of times I've sat down knee to knee, nose to nose, and done inventory with them. And it's been great. Don't get me wrong, those moments are great. But I'll tell you what I do is I do a lot of phone time with him. And we don't do small talk. When I did my 5th steps with him, I had my inventory written and we got down to business. We said a prayer. God, help us to be honest. Help us to see the truth. It's that prayer that I write across the top of my inventory page. And I shared my inventory with this man. And like I had said earlier, like I wasn't honest about a lot of things with him, like how I really felt in my marriage. For one, I knew it was insane how I really felt in my marriage, but I wanted to manage it so badly that I wasn't willing to lay it on the table. And guess what? If anything's important to me in my life, I have to lay it on the table. And if I don't lay it on the table, it goes away. It's like neglect. For me to leave you out of my inventory, if you're important to me, I'm neglecting you. Now, a lot of us think that our significant others, our wives, husbands, boyfriends, or girlfriends, well, if I'm writing inventory on her, that means something's wrong. No, that means I'm practicing the program. Because if I think I'm protecting my relationship by not writing inventory on it, I'm actually neglecting it. That's the truth. About any area of my life. If any area of my life is not making its way into my inventory, I am neglecting it, and that will disappear. Trust me, I've learned this out of my own heartfelt experience. If I learned easy, I wouldn't have to learn hard. But my experience has been forged out on an anvil. I kid you not. But we need to find somebody that we can trust to take us through this work. Now, if somebody's not a student, don't approach them and think that they're going to be your teacher. It is not going to happen. The key to what really is step 5, it's like a 12-step thing, like you're going to sponsor somebody and they're all connected here. But the key to it all is 1 through 11. All right? You want to be a good sponsor that you can take somebody through their 5th step? Practice 1 through 11. But at this point, we haven't gotten to 11 yet. We've got to find somebody that's able to listen to our 5th step. We got to find... Now, back in the day, they didn't have anybody. When this book was written, you got it mailed to you. And then, go find a priest. Somebody that you could look to as a spiritual advisor. Somebody you can trust. We're about wrapped up here now? All right. I didn't know how long I've been going here. I really haven't been paying attention, sorry. But don't be so locked into the idea that you need to sit face to face with somebody or it's not going to work. I've had people come up to me and tell me that. Like I might be sharing it Friday night at a conference somewhere. And after my talk, somebody will come up and say, you know what, you really need a local sponsor. And I'm thinking, what, were you sleeping? People just have ideas about that stuff. I don't, I make stuff up, I get it. My fear inventory is full of stuff I made up. Just make it up in my head and it must be true because I thought of it. Right? But don't be so locked into that one. If you can't find somebody local, go outside of local. Be dedicated to that phone appointment. I do not miss my phone appointments with my sponsor. And if I did, he would drop me like a bad habit. And that's how I am with the guys I sponsor. We're gonna meet at this certain time on the phone. You can call me anytime you want. I can call him anytime I want, but 6:15 on Friday night, I'm dedicated to that time. I don't miss appointments. I don't call late. I've had guys, oh, sorry, man. I was in line at the grocery store. I'm like, what? You're in line at the what are you, crazy? I'm sitting here waiting for you to call. Your life's on the line to do this stuff, and you go to the grocery store? You're that thoughtless about your own life? This is how I do it with my sponsor. 6:13, 6:14, 6:15, click. That's how it is with me. It's because I mean business, But I'll tell you what, our illness means business. And if we've done a thorough inventory, we get real clear on that stuff. Ron, thanks for having me up here.
Thank you, Scott, for stepping up. Epic job, of course. Now the favorite part of any type of mini convention, the free lunch, right? So let's go eat, and then we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back here again when we're done.